Vote no!
Hello ladies and genitals, and welcome to True Stories from Real Life. I've been threatening to do this for a while, so here's your introduction. This is about my some of my trucking stories, and if you'll stick around till the end, you can find out about the ASDA First Aider. It's an absolute perler. I've been trucking on and off for about 25 years now, and for some of that I was 5 years as a driving instructor, and for about 10 years I was driving fire engines. So most of my life really I've been a driver of some sort to earn a living. I passed my class 2 with the fire service, and with the fire service at the time most fire engines were automatic. I was offered a job somewhere, but I couldn't do it because it was a manual gearbox driving commercial trucks. So I paid to do a class 1 manual conversion. I could then get some work on some of my days off to top up my income a bit. But most of the trucks out there were manual. Nowadays, most of the trucks out there are automatic. Amazing, isn't it? I did pass in an Arctic, but I hadn't got a fucking clue what I was doing. One day you pass the test, and literally the next day I was driving One Stop, a sort of cheapo sort of corner shop store. And I can assure you, driving for that type of company is the least of your worries as a trucker. On a positive note, after leaving the fire service in 2005 due to their never-ending bullshit, I did manage to keep my head above water all the time, and there I was from then until now by trucking. So it served a purpose. You can get an income from it, but it is not what the general public think it is. To listen to the general public, you would think that truckers were multimillionaires. You quickly work out that it is a shit job with shit pay, and nobody gives a fuck if you live or die. The DVSA and the government are also very intent on getting into your pocket to retrieve as much of your wages as they possibly can through fines, suspension of your licence, and sometimes they'll even put you in prison for the slightest of infringements. The training is absolute shit, and I'm absolutely, completely amazed, gobsmacked, and my gast is flabbered that there is not more carnage on the roads. I'd turn up at some transport offices and they wouldn't even acknowledge that you existed, unless you were knocking the glass and shouting through the window that I'm here, I'm due to start at 6 o'clock, it's past now, and nobody's even looked round to see if I'm actually fucking alive. So I'll entertain you with a few experiences, shall I? Stay glued. Don't forget, the last one is the ASDA First Aider. At the back of some trucks on the trailers in in the UK, there's like a little orange box about this big where you flip the cover up and it operates the tail lift on the back of the trailer or on the back of the rigid. They are on rigids and articulated lorries. These are operated by a small plastic key which you shove in, turn, and it then turns on the controls so that you can operate the tail lift from inside of the back of the trailer. The tail lift enables the driver to unload the pallets from the back of the truck, put it on the tail lift, and then from inside the trailer operate a switch which lowers and raises the tail lift so whoever's on the loading bay can unload the trailer from there. When I was working at Poundland, yes, that famous store, I'd got a mission one morning which involved the use of a tail lift when I got to the store that was taking the delivery. And I hadn't got one of these little orange keys that operate the box to operate the tail lift. So I went into the office, the transport office, and just said, can I have a plastic key to operate the tail lift for when I get there. This was about 4 o'clock in the morning, 0400 hours. So it was pretty dark and I had to sort of prepare for the trip. So I asked at the transport office, have you got a key please to operate the tail lift? We don't supply those to agency drivers. Well, my face couldn't hide my incredulity. A plastic key that cost about 10 pence and they don't supply them to agency drivers. How would you like me to unload the truck? Would you like me to use my Jedi mind powers? And the answer was this. What you need to do is go to one of the bushes by the perimeter fence in the yard and cut yourself off a twig that will fit into the box where the key goes and stay there while you unload the truck. Absolute true. What do you want me to cut this piece of twig off with? Not my problem, mate, was the answer from behind the screen. My jaw was on the floor and my head was shaking in that, what the fuck? When we get that motion that you get in your head, where you're going, I don't believe what I'm hearing. When you get confronted with absolute unbelievable bollocks. Luckily, I'd got a small penknife with a very small saw on it. So I plodded over to the bushes. This is 4 o'clock in the morning, don't forget, in the dark. Cut a few twigs off, then walked over back to the trailer to trim one to fit. And I kept a twig for future use because they wouldn't give out a little plastic key to agency drivers. That's an absolute true story. Here's another one for you. I was at a mission on another smaller firm, sort of a private firm, not as big as Poundland. I can't remember the name. And I was doing my checks around the tractor unit and around the trailer. And I noticed that the fuel gauge was showing empty, which obviously in the transport industry, fuel's a fairly important thing to have. So I went to the office and told them, and the manager came back to the rig and showed me how to check the tank was full. He took the fuel cap off, shoved his finger in, pulled it out, and there was diesel on it. The fuel gauge don't work, mate. You've got enough for today. Absolute true story. And here's another one that shows you just how much of a shit the transport companies don't give about their drivers. I broke down on the way from a job. Luckily, I was about 7 miles from the depot and the job was almost over. I could hear some crunching and the gearbox literally crunched, banged, internally destroyed itself, and the truck was basically rolling along down this hill. It was a bit of bitter luck that I was on a hill. So I rolled it to the side of the road with this crunching coming from the gearbox underneath me, and got it into a safe position, luckily, and put the hazards on. I notified the depot and they said a breakdown was on the way. It wasn't. They hadn't found the breakdown. But I'll tell you it was, just to stick to their side of the story. Actually what had happened, the first thing they did was they dispatched another driver with the tractor unit, which is the bit at the front of an Arctic that tows the trailer. And guess what he was there for? Nothing to do with me or my safety. He'd actually come to retrieve the trailer because the trailer and what was on it was worth more than me. So he hitches up to the trailer, buggers off, and leaves me with his tractor unit at the side of the road, waiting for recovery, which at that point hadn't been found. They'd made sure they'd retrieved the trailer and just left me there. Once I'd waited an hour or two for the recovery, I called my girlfriend and she had to come to pick me up to take me back to the depot so I could clock out, and I'd already done more than 15 hours that day. That's how much of a shit they give about drivers. The tractor unit was recovered, but the point of the story being is that I had to get somebody to come and fetch me that wasn't part of the company. And there's more. Even more true stories like that for future merriment on future videos. Stay tuned. So anyway, in my trucking career, this was, well, career, that's a bit of a euphemism really. There's no career in it. I looked for the cleanest, easiest jobs. And the last story there that I recounted to you was who I worked for most. It was a company called Movianto, and they moved healthcare stuff around the country. So they were generally clean and on the ball with delivery times, retrieval times, unloading and stuff like that. So there was hardly any sort of waiting about because of the nature of the job that they did, and it was clean because of the nature of, most of the times it was clean because of the nature of the job that they did. And this is the story you've all been waiting for. I was driving for Movianto at the time. One evening, one summer, I was doing a run down to Bedford for them. It was a regular run. And there was a stretch of motorway with narrowed lanes, which is par for the course on the, I think it was the M1. The outside lane was bounded by row after row of one of those concrete barriers that have a lip at the bottom. So it's like effectively like a curb on a motorway in the outside lane. You amateurs out there, that means you lot, we'll call this the fast lane. It's the outside lane, okay? They position them end to end to form a barrier between when they're narrowing the lanes or with contraflows and stuff like that. Now, when cars clip curbs with their smallish wheels, even at low speeds of say 30 to 40 miles an hour, they'll clip the curb and it will flip the car. It will literally throw the car into the air. I've seen it happen on at least 2 occasions. When you clip the curb in a lorry with the large diameter wheels, they sort of get dragged in, sort of sucked in, and it's hard to get out if you find yourself in that position. Now it was a clear sunny day, and I was making mental notes of the traffic around me. There were 3 lanes, but they were narrow. And I was coming up to a junction on the left which I didn't need to take, but I knew there would be a queue at, so I was getting ready to move over to the middle lane. As I was checking this out, in my driver's side mirror, in the middle lane at my side, I noticed an ASDA delivery van. You know, the same as the Tesco's or the Waitrose or the Ocado. And I noticed him there. So I had to take sort of mental note before I started pulling out and crushed the life out of him. There's a prison sentence for you. So I put my indicator on to change lanes, and all of a sudden, to my right at about the 2 o'clock position, this car just flips up and just into the air. We're all travelling at 50 miles an hour. There's cars everywhere, vehicles everywhere. This car just flips up and turns from right to left, one circle in the air, and lands bang smack right on its wheels, all 4 wheels. Incredible piece of luck. Misses everything around it and comes to rest in a cloud of dust and bits of debris that had come off the front of the car. It had hit one of those curbs. It had just clipped it and just flipped. An amazing piece of luck. Missed all the cars around it and everything comes to a halt. I'm pretty sure now all the damage was done apart from to this car. But I knew the curb had been clipped. I positioned my rig as awkwardly as possible to stop people coming past, and then got on the phone to the emergency services. It looked okay, there was no smoke coming from the car or obvious signs of fire, and people were already getting out of their cars to assist to whoever was in that car and had landed. Once I'd made sure that the cops had put the tea down, the firemen had put the beer down, and the paramedics had put each other down, I got on the phone to the depot and let them know what had happened. Then I got out the truck just to give the peasants the benefit of my fire service and police experience. If you've ever seen John Cleese in The Meaning of Life, where he's strolling around in the middle of a battle with Zulus with a cup of tea and a saucer or having a shave, that's what I was trying to do. Unfortunately, I hadn't got a cup of tea on a saucer. but I was acting the English officer class. Strolling over to the wreck, unfortunately without a cup of tea on a saucer, I used my best English officer class voice just to give the impression that all the peasants were safe now because I was here. Anyway, I went, anybody here called the police or fire service? And the answer was, no mate, but they're on the way. Now, there's a woman in the driver's seat. She'd got a seatbelt on, fortunately. She looked a bit dazed, and somebody was already in the back holding her head up straight, so somebody knew what they were doing. Somebody in the back seat just holding their head still. But unfortunately, there was still no fire. Damn. People do their best in circumstances like this, but the terror and shock is evident in the faces of people that haven't seen it before. And there was no danger, really, but the adrenaline was pumping from every orifice known to medical science. And the ASDA driver was doing a bit of running around with his first aid kit and his high-vis jacket on. And I had a little bit of a chat with the people there just to, you know, make sure everything was on the ball because I needed to move my truck to stop the motorway from being blocked, and also I wanted to get home before 2 o'clock in the morning. So anyway, I spoke to who appeared to be the leader of the People's Dispensary for Car Crash Victims, and I just said, look, I'm going to get off now then because I found all the emergency services, you evidently have. And they're on the way and it looks like everything's okay. And it was sort of stabilising. And the ASDA first aider was still running around with his little first aid kit. So without warning, the ASDA bloke runs up to me and goes, "It's okay, I'm an ASDA first aider." I went, "Okay mate, that's alright, carry on." And the way things are going with the bastards that run the country, you might be seeing more of him in an official capacity in A&E departments. I'm signing off for now. Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
I'm your top veggie sausage. I'm your choice. All the way from Tipton in a gold Rolls Royce.